Commander Ryan Holt staggered through the smoke and wreckage of the battlefield, his uniform torn, face smeared with the dirt and blood of a dozen skirmishes. The clang of alien weaponry and the hum of lasers filled the air, a constant reminder that humanity was at war for its very survival. The cries of the wounded echoed from the wreckage of their fallen ships, but Holt barely heard them. He was too focused on the hulking figure ahead of him, the Valkyrie warrior. The alien's silver skin shimmered under the burning sun of the planet's barren surface, its eyes glowing an unnatural shade of violet. It towered over Holt, easily twice his size, with broad shoulders and a lean frame carved from centuries of battle. Its face was a mess of scars and battle tattoos, a terrifying visage that most soldiers would break under. But not Holt. He met its gaze, refusing to flinch. His soldiers had fallen. His fleet was in tatters. The Earth's survival was now dependent on a deal that seemed impossible, a blood pact with the very enemy that had ravaged their cities. The Valkyrie warrior, one of the last of a dying race, stood motionless, seemingly unbothered by the ongoing chaos around them. Slowly, it extended one massive hand, and in the palm rested a dark liquid that seemed to pulse with an eerie glow. Holt's heart raced, not from fear, but from the realization that this was it. The choice he made in the next few seconds could alter the fate of everything he'd ever known. "Take it," the warrior's voice was low, gravelly, and unnervingly calm. "Why would I trust you?" Holt's voice cracked, more from exhaustion than doubt. He had seen enough alien treachery to fill a dozen lifetimes. The Valkyrie had destroyed entire colonies. They'd enslaved millions. And now, after everything, this, an offer of a blood exchange. "You have no choice," the alien answered. There was something almost pitiful in its tone, a quiet desperation that Holt couldn't ignore. "If you want to survive the Nihari, you will need the strength of my kind. You and we are bound now." The Nihari. Holt clenched his jaw. The new enemy had swept across the galaxy, leaving nothing but ruin in their wake. The Valkyrie, once proud warriors, had been driven into the shadows by the invaders. Holt had heard stories of the Nihari, machines that consumed entire planets, turning every living thing into fuel for their endless hunger. "I've lost everything," Holt muttered under his breath, staring at the dark liquid. "My people, my fleet." The Valkyrie warrior's hand remained outstretched. "This is your choice, Commander. Do not hesitate." Holt hesitated for only a heartbeat longer. His soldiers needed him. Earth needed him. He couldn't afford to make this decision based on fear. His mind raced with possibilities, with the weight of every past decision, every life lost, but in the end, there was only one thing that mattered: survival. He reached out, his fingers trembling as they touched the alien's blood. As the liquid made contact with his skin, a searing heat shot up his arm, spreading through his veins like wildfire. Pain tore through his body, so intense that his vision blurred, and his legs buckled beneath him. For a moment, he thought he might collapse, but the strength of the Valkyrie's blood surged into him, its power overwhelming. His heart beat faster, pumping the foreign blood through his body as it began to merge with his own. Holt's eyes snapped open, and for a brief moment, he saw the battlefield through new eyes, a perfect clarity, as if the world had slowed to a crawl. He could feel the pulse of the Valkyrie's presence in his mind, a strange and unsettling connection that left him shuddering with its alien force. His wounds, which had only moments before threatened to take him out, began to heal at a frightening rate. His muscles swelled with strength, and his vision sharpened. But something else stirred within him, a deep, primal awareness. Not just his own thoughts, but the thoughts of the warrior who had offered his blood. He could feel its ancient memories, its endless battle for survival, its despair at the fall of its people. "I warned you," the Valkyrie's voice echoed in his mind, as if it were a part of him now. "This bond will change you." Holt's breath came in shallow gasps, the new power threatening to consume him. "What have I done?" he muttered. "You've made the only choice that will save your people," the warrior responded, its voice now deep in Holt's consciousness. "But know this, Commander, there is a price for power. The Nihari will come, and when they do, you will need more than strength to defeat them. Holt clenched his fists, the new blood coursing through him like fire. He had the power, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. He needed more. And as the distant hum of a Nihari ship echoed through the atmosphere, Holt knew that the battle for Earth was only beginning. Then let them come, Holt growled, his voice deep and strange with the alien influence. I'm ready. The Valkyrie warrior nodded, a faint trace of approval in its alien eyes. So it begins. And with that, Holt stepped forward, the ground beneath him trembling with every footfall, a man changed by the blood of an ancient race and driven by the survival of his own. The next few hours felt like an eternity. Commander Ryan Holt stood on the observation deck of the Dauntless, the flagship of Earth's remaining fleet. The once pristine glass windows now reflected the dim glow of distant stars, casting eerie shadows on the quiet command center. Holt's hand rested on the cool, smooth railing, his fingers clenching and unclenching as if testing the strange new strength pulsing beneath his skin. He had tried to focus on the tasks at hand, but the feeling of the alien blood, alive, burning, foreign, coursing through his veins was impossible to ignore. Holt's breath came in uneven bursts as he adjusted to the sensation. His body felt both like his own and utterly alien. The constant hum of his enhanced senses drowned out the usual noise of the command center. He could hear the low murmur of the officers behind him, their discussions about fleet movements, enemy tactics, and the Nihari threat, but their words seemed distant, muffled as if they came from the other side of a thick glass wall. Commander? The voice of Lieutenant Sarah Jensen cut through his thoughts, and he turned sharply. She stood at the threshold of the deck, her brow furrowed with concern. You're spacing out again, she said, her tone a mix of worry and impatience. You've been like this since we finished the blood ritual. Holt ran a hand through his hair, trying to focus on her. I'm fine, Lieutenant, he said, his voice sounding less like his own. It was deeper, strained, as though someone else were speaking through him. A flicker of panic ran through him, but he tamped it down quickly. No time for weakness. Not now. She eyed him suspiciously but stepped closer. We need you, Commander. The Nihari are already in system. Their fleet is nearing the outer rim of Earth's defenses. Our only advantage now is the Valkyrie technology you've merged with. I know. Holt exhaled slowly, gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. I just can't shake this feeling that something's wrong. You're still adjusting to the blood pact. The power, she trailed off, clearly unsure how to finish her sentence. I understand why you did it. But it's not just physical strength, Holt. This isn't just about the Valkyrie's blood giving you more power. The words sank into his chest, heavy and unspoken. The power within him was intoxicating. He had never felt anything like it before, the sharpness of his senses, the unrelenting surge of energy that made him feel invincible, even as it gnawed at the edges of his mind. It was as if a part of the alien warrior, his experiences, his fears, and even his failures, now shared space within Holt's thoughts. Don't let it consume you, Jensen's voice broke through his reverie. You've always been human, Holt. Don't let the blood make you forget that. I won't forget, Holt said, his voice firm but wavering. He could feel the alien presence stirring again, a whisper of something darker just beneath his consciousness. Remember, the Valkyrie's voice echoed. We fight to survive. Nothing else matters. He gritted his teeth, shaking his head. I'm not losing myself. Not to this. The ship jolted suddenly, sending him stumbling against the railing. Red emergency lights flashed overhead as the Dauntless lurched under the assault of enemy fire. The Nihari had made their move. Damage report. Holt barked, regaining his composure and turning toward the tactical console at the back of the deck. The officers scrambled, tapping commands into the holographic interface. Shields holding, Commander, but they're weakening, one of the officers called out. We can't take many more direct hits. Deploy the Valkyrie tech, Holt ordered, his voice sharp and decisive. We've got one shot at this. All forward energy to weapons systems. The command center erupted into controlled chaos, but Holt barely noticed. His senses had sharpened beyond recognition. He could hear the faint hum of the Valkyrie tech as it powered up, thrumming through the Dauntless. A strange, almost soothing sensation settled into him as the ship's systems came online. He could feel every pulse of energy, every crackle of power surging from the alien technology into their weapons systems. "Fire," he said quietly, barely above a whisper. The ship's cannons fired in rapid succession, beams of violet energy streaking toward the approaching Nihari fleet. Holt watched, his heart pounding with adrenaline, as the beams struck their targets, tearing through the enemy ships with surgical precision. The power was immense, but the cost of it was growing harder to ignore. "Commander." Jensen's voice cut through his focus. "We've lost contact with the outer defense stations. The Nihari they're breaking through. The fleet won't hold much longer." Holt's chest tightened. He was supposed to be humanity's savior, the one who would turn the tide. Yet, with every passing moment, he felt more like a puppet, bound by the strings of alien blood. The truth was undeniable, his humanity was slipping away. "Then we fight," Holt said, his voice trembling with an unshakable resolve. He looked at Jensen, his eyes no longer fully his own. "Prepare the Dauntless for a direct assault. We take the fight to them." As he turned to leave the deck, his senses flared again, a searing pulse of alien energy coursing through him, nearly blinding him with its intensity. It was as if someone, was urging him forward. Victory or death. The thought wasn't his own, but it felt like a call to war, a demand to continue the fight. Holt didn't know if he was ready for what was to come, but there was no turning back now. The door slid open, and he stepped into the chaos of the bridge, the weight of his decision settling like a stone in his stomach. The war had just begun. The Dauntless shook under the barrage of fire from the Nihari ships. Holt gripped the command chair with white knuckles as the deck trembled beneath him. His mind raced, his thoughts clouded by the strange new presence that had settled in his head. The blood of the Valkyrie had changed him, he could feel it more with every passing second. The alien influence was no longer a whisper, it was a constant hum in his mind, urging him forward, guiding his every move. "Commander." Jensen's voice broke through the chaos, sharp and clear. She stood at his side, her face a mask of worry. "We've lost another ship. The Nihari's relentless. We need to think fast." Holt's eyes flicked to the holographic display in front of him, watching the numbers tick down as the fleet's defense systems buckled under the pressure. The Nihari weren't just attacking, they were adapting. Each strike was more coordinated, more ruthless than the last. Holt could feel the strategy unfolding in his mind, sharper and more precise than ever before. "We can't keep fighting like this," Holt muttered, his voice sounding alien to his own ears. It was lower now, tinged with something he didn't quite recognize. "We need to strike at their heart. Take out their command ship." Jensen's gaze hardened. "That's suicide, Commander. The Nihari command ship is heavily fortified. If we go after it, we'll be outnumbered and outgunned." Holt didn't respond right away. He felt the Valkyrie presence deep within him, pushing him to act. "Do it." The thought echoed like a chant in his mind, its command absolute. Holt could almost see the battlefield in his mind, the movements of every ship, every strike. "Prepare the fleet," Holt said, his voice gaining strength. "We're going after the command ship." Jensen stared at him, her expression one of disbelief. "This isn't like you, Holt. You're not thinking clearly. The blood, it's changing you. It's clouding your judgment." A cold wave of frustration washed over him. He wanted to snap at her, to explain that he had no choice, that humanity's last hope rested on his shoulders, but the Valkyrie blood surged through him, making his thoughts clearer, faster. He had no time for hesitation. "I've seen how they fight, Sarah. We don't have a choice. If we don't take down their command ship, they'll destroy us all." Jensen clenched her jaw but said nothing. Holt could feel her distrust, the fear rising in her eyes. She didn't understand. No one could. He was no longer just human, not in the way he had been. But if he was going to lead them to victory, he needed them to trust him. Launch all fighters, Holt ordered. Prepare for a full assault. Target their command ship. No mercy. The crew sprang into action, but Holt felt no thrill from the chaos. He was beyond that now. The Valkyrie blood coursed through his veins, giving him the clarity he needed, but also a cold, distant detachment. He wasn't sure who was in control anymore, his own will or the alien force embedded deep within him. Every time he tried to focus, to keep a grip on his humanity, the blood pulsed, reminding him of its power. The Dauntless surged forward, its weapon systems charging as they approached the Nihari fleet. The fighters shot out from the hangars like a swarm of hornets, circling the enemy, distracting them long enough for the Dauntless to make its move. But Holt's focus was already elsewhere. He could feel the Nihari command ship, its presence, like a dark, twisted energy at the heart of the fleet. He could sense the control it exerted over the entire armada. It was more than just a ship, it was the key to the Nihari's strategy, and if they took it down, they would cripple the invaders' ability to fight back. "Hold steady," Holt muttered, his voice more to himself than to anyone else. He had a plan, one that had come to him in a flash, clear and undeniable. The Valkyrie blood inside him had unlocked a new level of understanding, one that allowed him to see the battlefield in ways no human ever could. He could feel the flow of energy, the vulnerabilities in the enemy's defenses. "Commander, we're in range," Jensen called out from the comms console. "This is it. We're locked on." Holt nodded, his pulse steady. "Fire." The Dauntless cannons erupted in a blaze of violet energy, the beams tearing through the vast emptiness of space and slamming into the Nihari command ship. The impact was immediate, catastrophic. The ship's shields flickered, buckled, and then crumpled under the onslaught. The explosion that followed lit up the dark expanse of space like a star-going nova, sending shockwaves through the surrounding Nihari vessels. But Holt didn't feel satisfaction. Instead, a deep unease washed over him. The Valkyrie's presence seemed to stir, sensing something Holt couldn't quite place. His instincts screamed at him that the battle wasn't over, not yet. "I don't like this," he muttered under his breath, his hand trembling as it hovered over the controls. As the debris from the explosion scattered in every direction, something strange began to happen. The remaining Nihari ships, though disoriented, were regrouping too quickly. And then, to Holt's horror, a massive rift in space tore open near the center of the fleet. Out of the rift came a ship unlike anything Holt had ever seen. It was enormous, an amalgamation of dark metal and twisted, organic structures that seemed to pulse and writhe with unnatural life. The Nihari had a new weapon, a weapon that Holt knew would not be defeated so easily. "All ships, retreat!" Holt commanded, his voice sharp and urgent. But it was too late. The rift widened, and from it emerged an army of new Nihari ships, each one more advanced, more deadly than anything they had faced before. This was the true threat. The air on the Dauntless was thick with tension. Holt stood at the center of the bridge, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. The Nihari fleet loomed ahead, its twisted new ships emerging from the rift like nightmares made flesh. He could feel their presence, an overwhelming wave of malicious intent that washed over him, sending a cold shiver down his spine. But what unsettled him most wasn't the fleet, nor the strange ship at its center. It was the growing awareness inside him, the Valkyrie blood, the alien power, urging him to act, to push forward, to strike. "Holt!" Jensen's voice was low, urgent. She was standing beside him, her eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. "We need to do something. Now." The ship's hull trembled as another volley of fire rocked the Dauntless, sending sparks flying from the ceiling. Holt didn't flinch. He was beyond that now. His mind, sharp and focused, saw the battlefield in ways the human mind never could. He could see the flow of energy, the delicate points in the Nihari formation, the weak spots in their defense. "We're losing control of the perimeter," Jensen continued, her voice strained. "If we don't pull back, we'll be wiped out before we even get close to the rift." "We can't pull back," Holt replied, his voice cold and steady. "Not anymore." The power from the Valkyrie blood was like a torrent inside him, alive and pulsing, directing him. Holt didn't know how much of his own mind was still in control, but the plan was clear. He had to act, and he had to do it now. Jensen shook her head, disbelief flashing across her face. Holt, this is madness. The new ships, they're too powerful. We can't just charge into that rift and hope to survive. He didn't respond at first, his eyes still fixed on the screen. A strange, unsettling sense of calm had settled over him, as if he were detached from everything happening around him. The hum of alien energy, of the Valkyrie power, thrummed through his veins like a second heartbeat, drowning out the noise, the fear. It was a feeling he couldn't quite understand, but one that demanded action. Do it, a voice whispered inside his mind, not his own, but foreign, ancient. Strike. Destroy. He forced himself to look away from the rift, turning toward Jensen. I'm not asking for your approval, Lieutenant. I'm telling you, we're going in. We'll take them down from the inside. Jensen stared at him, her eyes flickering with a mix of horror and concern. This isn't you, Holt. The weight of her words hit him harder than he expected. But the Valkyrie power pressed on, forcing his will to bend to its rhythm. This was his only chance. He had no choice. Prepare the crew for a full assault, Holt said, his voice low but resolute. Get us into the rift. Now. The crew moved quickly, their motion sharp and practiced as they followed his orders. Holt barely noticed. His mind was already somewhere else, buried deep in the Valkyrie's ancient knowledge. The ship jerked as it powered forward, and Holt gripped the armrests of his chair, his body rigid, his mind straining to keep control. The rift was ahead, pulsating with an otherworldly energy that seemed to beckon him. We're in position, Jensen said, her voice tight with apprehension. The rift ahead was no longer just a tear in space, it was a living thing. The Nihari ships, once clustered around it, had now formed a defensive perimeter, as if guarding the entrance to a greater mystery. Holt could sense the command ship at the center of it all, the heart of the Nihari's power. It loomed like a dark, twisted monolith in the heart of the rift. His mind reeled. Was this the ultimate weapon the Nihari had been hiding? The power behind the invasion? Holt could feel it, an oppressive weight pressing down on him. He needed to destroy it, but the cost. The rift is closing, Jensen shouted, her voice frantic as the monitors flashed red. We've only got seconds before. Now, Holt said, cutting her off. His fingers flew over the console, his body moving like a machine. The Dauntless shuddered, the hull creaking as its weapon systems powered up. Holt could feel the surge of energy in his bones, an unnatural power that made every movement feel like it had a purpose, a destination. The first shot fired, a streak of brilliant violet light that sliced through the darkness, hitting the edge of the Nihari command ship. The blast was precise, devastating, and the ship's shields flickered. Holt watched, his breath catching, as the ripple effect spread outward, causing the Nihari ships around it to falter, their formation disrupted. But it wasn't enough. The command ship held fast, its shields regenerating with terrifying speed. Again, Holt growled. Increase power to the weapons. We've got one shot at this. Jensen hesitated, her gaze flickering toward him, then the screen. Holt, you're not thinking clearly. We need. I said fire. Holt's voice cracked with a force that shocked even him. The command had already left his mouth before he realized how desperate it had sounded. Another blast of violet energy hit the Nihari ship. This time, it punched through the shield, the explosion ripping through the hull. The ship buckled, groaning under the force of the attack. But then, as the debris began to scatter, something unexpected happened. A massive shockwave erupted from the command ship, sending a pulse of energy crashing into the Dauntless. The ship jolted violently, the lights flickering as systems shut down. We're losing power. Jensen cried, scrambling to keep her balance. And then, in that instant of chaotic silence, Holt knew the truth. The Nihari had been waiting for them.